welcome back to Crafty Quilting Designs. I hope you're well and everybody's having a really great day. Now guys, so we are going to start building this quilt top and hopefully turn it into a quilt by the end of the tutorials. Now notice I said tutorials, so we are going to compile this in 3 tutorials. So today we're going to be doing the first one. Alright, so the first row. Now before I move on any further, what I would like to say before I forget is that whatever backing fabric you actually choose, just ensure it is not a print fabric whereby you need to line up. That means that if, for example, you have a fabric where there's bunnies on it and you cut the fabric, because obviously we'll be cutting the fabric into 3 rows, okay, you will then need to make sure that you align the head and the body of the bunny, so to speak, to line up. Otherwise you're going to have the head there and the body there. All right, so I would say avoid using printed fabric like that. Okay, so just use fabric with an all over print, so even though where you cut it, it doesn't show that there is going to be a joining of the fabrics. All right, now try your best to follow the instructions as clearly as possible for the first row, because that's really important, and I think the video is quite detailed enough. Now we're doing it in 3 I'm giving the information in 3 videos, because I think to add it in all into one is going to be too much information, and I know sometimes people just break down when there's too much information. So 3 tutorials which will be easier to compile, and that way you can compile it easier. Take your time, look at the video again and again to ensure that you know what you're doing, which is quite easy in that sense, because the video is there for you to go back and to just look at it again to ensure that you know the comprehension is understood. Now I think that's it, all I've got to say to you really. So don't forget to like and subscribe, hit that notification bell, and of course give me a thumbs up. And for those of you who are new here, we are actually doing a star sample quilt along, and we have decided together as a group to turn that quilt along into a quilt as you go. So that's what we're doing today. So for those of you who are always with me, thank you so much guys for coming back, and have a good one. Enjoy the tutorial, and I shall see you next week. So any questions, don't forget to give me a little time. I love answering your questions, and just let me know what you think of the process. Okay, so we are adding the 3 layers together for this particular one. All right guys, so love you lots. See you then. Bye for now. Happy quilting. Okay guys, so the first things we're going to need to do is to cut some fabric, and we need to cut 4 strips, and these are our inner sashings, okay, for our stars. Now what we're going to do is to compile the quilt as we go in rows, and we're going to quilt the backing onto this one also, but we are not going to do it piece by piece obviously, because we've already made the blocks, which is a method I prefer, to make the blocks, then to sew the blocks onto the backing as well as the batting. All right, so you need to cut some strips, and you need 4 of those, and the size of those strips is 1.5 by 12.5. Why 12.5? Because that is the length of our squares, okay, of all of our quilting squares here, right? And we need to make sure they're nice and ironed. The next objective is to ensure that the blocks are really pressed really neatly and nice and flat also. Okay, I have already done so with mine. Now the next, 3rd objective is to decide which blocks you want to lay out first. In total you should have 17 of the blocks that we've made, okay? That includes our center star. So I have opted to go with these ones here, and I'm going to show them to you, and you can choose any, it doesn't really matter. This is just the options I have chosen. So I've decided to start with a sawtooth, okay, and also the Ohio star with the hourglass in the middle, and again you can choose any one. A friendship is the 3rd, a spinning star And hopefully, if you've noticed, this is literally, the spinning star is literally two friendship stars together. I was really hoping someone would have said that to me, but I don't think anyone actually noticed this. But if you look at your spinning stars very carefully, you can actually see that it's a double friendship star together. All right, but I have decided to call it a spinning star. And the last one I went with was another or the chevron, in this case, sawtooth. All right, so those are my 5 stars that I've selected, and I'm going to put them back in the order of which I showed them to you, because that's the order I'm going to put them on the batting on. All right, so get those ready, and the next objective now is to simply get it onto the batting, and I'm going to show you that. So let's move on to that now. All right guys, so let's get on to the next stages now. So I have rolled out my batting. My batting comes on a roll, okay? And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because I don't want you to think that this is the length of batting that I'm going with. It's not, because my batting is folded here on the roll. So obviously when I open this up, it is going to be double its size, okay? I'm not sure exactly how long it is. So this ruler is 24, so it's roughly about 48 inches just on this side only. So obviously when we open it up, it's obviously going to be longer than 50 inches or so, all right, in length for this whole piece that I have here. Okay, now the most important thing here that you need to be mindful of is adding on your border allowance. So this is what's really important here. Now this quilt does come with borders. Okay, now if you want to add borders, this is what you would need to do, and this would apply for any quilt as you go method that you use, that I use here on my channel. Okay, so I have decided that we're going to have a 7-inch border. We're going to have a 2 inches to start with, and then we're going to have 5 inches, hence the reason 7. So I've measured 7 across on the side and 7 at the top, bearing in mind that you need to do this for both ends. Okay, as long as you know that you have your 5 inches plus your 2 inches, your 7 inches there, your 7 inches there, and on the other end you've got your 7 inches, that's fine. Even if you've got more, brilliant. The important thing is that you have room to play with. Okay, so what I have done now is to then take my ruler and just simply put a little marking with a pen there. I'm going to move the block so you can see it. Okay, so I know now where my block starts. So that is where the first block is going to go, and as you know already, my first block is a sawtooth. All right, so that's where I've placed it. Now the next thing you need to consider is the end of where the block drops. Okay, now I am not going to give myself lots of space underneath here for the batting. It's pointless. Why? Because we're going to trim this anyway. Okay, so I've only given myself, and I'm going to put the ruler on so that you can see, just literally ½ an inch. It's only ½ an inch I've given myself there, from the top where it starts to the end there, because I am going to cut this, remember. So I'm only going to give myself ½ an inch. I don't want any extra, I don't want too much, because this is going to be cut and I don't want to waste the batting. All right, they are very expensive, and this one comes in a roll, so the last thing I want to do is to waste the actual materials. So if I was you, I wouldn't add too much underneath there. Just keep it small. Okay, important things here is the top for your borders and the side borders. All right, so I think that's it for now. I am going to now cut this, and I'm going to show you all of the blocks laid out on top of it, and I'm also going to show you now how to cut the batting so that we can add those 2 bits together once we start sewing or quilting. All right, so let's get started on that one. Okay, so this is what I've done now. Just wanted to show you the next step. So I have pinned all of the blocks and the sashings on together, just so that I give myself sort of visual guide as to how the block is going to lay out, what it looks like, etc. And obviously my allowances for my borders, etc. Okay, so I've done all of that all the way to the other end on this side here, where I have marked it again, so I know now where my block ends. And this is my 7 inches across here to the end, from the top to the end there where I've marked it. Okay, so I'm going to cut this extra batting off now, because I don't need that there giving me any extra bulk when I'm actually quilting. So this is the whole row now ready, inclusive of my border sizes. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is cut, as I said, and then I'm going to now place this on top of my backing fabric to measure and cut the same length here. Okay, so I'm going to cut the same width, and I'm going to show you I'm also cut the same length. Okay, all right, so what I have done now is went ahead and cut my backing fabric same size, length, width as my batting. All right, the same I've done for the backing. All right, that is to ensure that once I put those two together, it's measured the same. Now what I really want you to be mindful of is very much to the end here, where I have left that sort of ½ inch there where I'm going to cut off. Okay, so it's very important that the backing is the same size. Mine is just a touch over, nothing major. Okay, just a touch over. Even if you go a touch over, it's fine. Okay, because this end is where we're actually going to join the other row together. So it's very important that you do not trim it right to the edge of the block, and I'm referring to the backing here. So I do not suggest that you cut the batting to the edge of the block, nor do you cut the backing fabric to the edge of the block. It must extend to that inch that I suggested. Okay, because we are going to remove that, and once we remove that, we will then have the backing exposed, and that area there is where we're actually going to actually join the fabric. So I'm going to move the camera closer so you can see exactly what I'm referring to. All right, so this is what I'm referring to here. So do not cut them right to the top there. Okay, you want to give yourself an extra room, as I suggested, and then once we've completed quilting the top, then we are going to trim away this, leaving the excess at the end there. Okay, now the reason I've done it this way is because I do not want to add another strip. Okay, I'm going to use this here, the backing here, to actually join it. Okay, another thing I would suggest is try the other thing I would suggest is try not to choose a backing where you have to literally try and join the fabrics. No, I am working with a Paisley Batiks print at the back here, and that's fine. So when I do fold it over to join it to the other row, I don't have to worry about matching up the fabrics. Okay, so just be mindful of that. I would give you that sort of tip now. Right, so moving on now, as you can see, I have just rolled it in together so that it's nicely there, all folded in together, and I haven't glue based. I've only just pinned the blocks to the batting, but the batting is just using the rough side. Remember I spoke about the rough side of the fabric, sorry, the rough side of the batting that sticks to the backing. Okay, so I haven't glue based or anything, so it's just a rough side which clings to it quite easily. All right, so if you want, you can go ahead and spray base. It's just entirely down to you. What I am going to do though is just add a couple of pins onto it just so that it doesn't move. Okay, just to give a bit of extra security. I don't think it will, but that's what I'm going to do. And then once I lay them atop each other, i.e. once I put the 3 layers together, I then just use the iron on top of it just to smoothen out any creases, etc. And then I fold it, did it again, to just little warm heat just to remove any creases, fold it again, same thing. And you can see, you know, no issues, no stress at all. Okay, just a light warm iron, and that's what I did. So now I'm going to now I'm actually now going to sew onto this now. So I'm not going to start the quilting, so I'm just moving down the quilt to get to the starting point. As you can see, my starting point is there, still with my extra both layers backing and batting to add on to my borders, okay, as well as to the top. Now what I would advise is to just name this number 1, because the bottom and the top may look very similar. However, the middle piece is going to look very differently. I'm not really going to bother because I know I've started with this one here. This is my first block, and I have chosen this because I know the sawtooth here with the plain in the middle is the one I'm going to use. So this I know is my first row. So again, what I'm going to do is then put my first stitch on top there, and then I am going to stitch. I'm not going to worry about stitching the sides down. Okay, I'm just going to stitch, flip over my sashing and stitch, and then again same thing, fold it back, flip over my next block and stitch. So basically using the stitch and flip technique now to get it all done, and then I'm going to quilt. Now I'm only going to sew this one down first because I don't want it to move. So I'm just going to add a very 1/8 of an inch stitch there all the way down, no issues. All right, and then do the stitch and flip for all of the blocks and inner sashings all the way down. So let's get started on that now. Okay, so I have my machine set up here to get started. As you can see, I have my 1/4 inch feet on excuse me, and I'm just going to get started. So what I'm going to do is to unpin my sashing here and then fold it over and just continue to sew it all the way down using a 1/4 inch seam. So we are going to piece it just as we would normally using a 1/4 inch. All right, I have however put my stitch length onto number 3 only because there's a lot of layers there and I wanted to move quite smoothly. All right, so and I'm not worried about it getting loose or anything because this is going to be quilted. All right, so stitch length 3, and we're just gonna sew as we would normally. All right, so stitch and flip. So once it's completed, I'm going to show you the whole row before I start quilting. Alright, so I've sewn on 2 blocks now, including a sashing. So what I want you to pay attention to is once you've added on your sashing, what I did do was just finger press it so that it's nice and smooth, and then I added on my other block again, and I'm just gonna smoothen it out, so just make sure that there's no lumps or bumps or, you know, air pockets underneath there, because remember it's not glue, but if you want you can glue based so that you avoid that, but I think pinning is just fine. So what I'm going to do now is to then take this one out and then flip it over, line it up nicely, and then continue to sew. So again, once I've completed the whole row, I will show you what it looks like. Okay, and keep this nice and rolled so you don't have too much underneath your throat space. Keep it nice and tidy so it tucks in and it rolls in nice and tight. And again, one of the reasons for the quilt as you go is so that we don't have this huge sort of quilt underneath the throat space. All right, so just keep it nice and tucked, and as you go you just sew. All right, so let's get started on that now. All right guys, so all of the blocks have been stitched on. There are no quilting at the moment. So as we discussed, you can see the allowance at the top there for your borders, okay, and all of it has been stitched on. All right, so what I'm going to do now is to simply start to quilt this, and I'll show you a little bit of my quilting technique that I actually use. Now what I wanted to point out is because I've already marked here on the line where it should have ended when I laid it all out. Obviously we've got a little bit more space now, which is good. All right, which I knew was going to happen anyway, because once you sew the blocks together, definitely it changes. So we're going to do some quilting now, and I'm going to start within this block. And what I have done here, I don't know if you can make it out, I've used one of my markers. When I say markers, it's a crease line, so you can use your clover marker and just mark it so that you know where you want to start for your quilting. Alright guys, so the first row is now completed. Okay, now what I really jumped on to show you or to tell you about was to ensure that once you have completed the first row, you need to ensure that you have trimmed the batting off to the edge of the blocks. So along all of the blocks I need you to trim the batting so that it's nice and equal. Also, do not trim away this extra. Remember we spoke about that earlier, because I'm going to use this hanging extra here to join the blocks or the rows together in this particular instance. Okay, so don't cut that away. Now the reason I'm doing that, you may be wondering, well why is she just not trimming it up? Well, the reason I'm doing that is because I want to use the extra fabric to join it together, and obviously it will make much sense to you when we get to that stage for the next tutorial, because I do not really want to add another strip behind. I don't want to do that. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to join it literally as you go for the next row of blocks. All right, so I think that's it for this week. We're going to stop there. I don't want to give you too much and it gets too confusing. So we're going to do it row by row. So obviously we've done row 1 today. Row 2 obviously is going to be a little bit bigger because that is the row with the center blocks. It's going to be a lot more wider. All right, so with that being said guys, I think that's all I've got for you today. So if you enjoyed the tutorial, don't forget to like and subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and of course if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to give me a typey message and I'll be too happy to answer your questions. Okay, so bye for now guys, and if I usually say happy quilting. Love you lots, take care and be safe. See you next week. Bye.